I mention this positive politics because on the other side, and you did have two Trumpist candidates in New Jersey and in Virginia, is you have a politics of division, a politics of confrontation. This us versus them approach, or as Trump puts it, the enemy's within. And I think what you saw is that might have worked for Trump in opposition, but when you present voters with that, when they have these day-to-day issues they're dealing with, that division confrontation doesn't necessarily work. And I would take it even further in terms of it. And these were just simply a few off-cycle races. But if you go down below the headline races, you've got the first Muslim woman who is Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. You've got a woman who is mayor of Detroit, Mary Sheffield. And if you go down to councils, school boards, et cetera, even in Republican areas, you were seeing Democrat candidates winning. I think Abigail Spanberger, the governor-elect of Virginia, probably put it best when she talked about pragmatism rather than partisanship, and when she talked about competence rather than chaos.
Let's turn our attention to American politics for the next 25 minutes or so. It was a really, really interesting week. This week saw the Democrats celebrating electoral triumphs across the country with successful governor races in Virginia and New Jersey and redrawing the electoral map in California, all, of course, capped by that landslide victory for the Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamani, the new mayor of New York City.
My friends, we have toppled a political dynasty. I wish Andrew Cuomo only the best in private life. But let tonight be the final time I utter his name as we turn the page on a politics that abandons the many and answers only to the few. New York, tonight you have delivered a mandate for change. Politics. A mandate for a city we can afford. And a mandate for a government that delivers exactly that.
Now, Donald Trump admitted that it had not been a good result for the Republicans, claiming it was because his name had not been on the ballot. So what lessons can we all draw from this? Because it's a year after that painful election defeat for the Democrats. Are they now beginning to see something of a fight back? And what do they really make of this new mayor of New York, Mamdani, who's getting, so much attention? He's a very, very fluent, slick communicator, very persuasive communicator, as we heard there. But how will he govern? Will this prove to be more of a hindrance than a help? And actually, lots of people, even across the world, are looking to Zoran Mamdani. Certainly people in this part of the world are, in terms of now, could he pave the way in terms of how the left should do politics? Well, we've got a great panel for you. Let me introduce them to you. Will Marshall is president and the founder of the Progressive Policy Institute in Washington. We've spoken to him before about democratic thinking. Hello, Will. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, thank you.
And welcome to the show, Mark Longabaugh, who is political strategist. And Mark's a former senior advisor to Bernie Sanders when he was running his presidential campaign. Mark, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
And welcome to Scott Lucas, who is Professor of International Politics at the Clinton Institute at University College Dublin. Scott, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here with y'all.
Well, look, Will, Mark and Scott, we've got lots to get through. Will, I'm going to start with you. What do you sort of take away from the results this week for the Democrats?
Well, as everybody understands, this was a really big night for Democrats. The party was famished for any kind of wins after 9 months of abuse from Trump and his minions, and picked up wins all over the landscape. So it was a great outcome. I think two things happened. One is that we had a crop of great candidates, and they all mostly won. And secondly, there was a strong anti-Trump surge. I mean, a lot of these candidates were lifted, and I think won by larger majorities because of anti-Trump sentiment that the voters wanted to take this opportunity to convey. So a weakened Trump, a strengthened Democratic Party is what comes out of this election.
Mark, your thoughts? Do you agree with Will?
I kind of agree with Will. I think two things. One, that Democrats always tend to overread their election returns. We did that in 2022. We lost the House, but somehow we twisted it into this great victory that led Joe Biden to decide to run again and disaster in 2024. So I think, we got to be clear-eyed at looking at these results. I mean, I do agree with Will. You can't deny we won a series of big victories. I thought the New Jersey victory was probably the most significant, quite frankly, because Cheryl had a legitimate opponent there. Spanberger was running against a woman who clearly was not competent. She turned around a lot of votes that Trump had gathered in 24, especially in the Hispanic community. So I think there's a lot of good stuff to see here, but I think we still have to be clear-eyed about the challenge that we have in 2026.
And Scott, your thoughts on that night, the wins?
I agree, but let me tee it up further for the experts with a couple of points. I think the first here is that beyond Democrat versus Republican or Trump versus no Trump, I think what you saw was a real contrast in terms of a politics here, which was a positive politics. And in some ways, I think for reasons we can explain, I think the Virginia, New Hampshire results were even more significant going down the road than the New York City one. And by positive politics, I mean the tones in which the campaigns were run, but also in terms of identifying specific issues, in terms of being, as community issues, whether you talk about the cost of energy, the cost of housing, whether you talk about transport, whether you talk healthcare, which is going to be a key issue going forward for the next year. And what you had was concrete policies being put down, but also this idea of, look, we need to go forward together. And I mentioned this positive politics because on the other side, and you did have two Trumpist candidates in New Jersey and in Virginia, is you have a politics of division, a politics of confrontation. This us versus them approach, or as Trump puts it, the enemies within. And I think what you saw is that might have worked for Trump in opposition, but when you present voters with that, when they have these day-to-day issues they're dealing with, that division confrontation doesn't necessarily work. And I would take it even further in terms of it. And these were just simply a few off-cycle races. But if you go down below the headline races, you've got the first Muslim woman who is Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. You've got a woman who is mayor of Detroit, Mary Sheffield. And if you go down to councils, school boards, et cetera, even in Republican areas, you were seeing Democrat candidates winning. I think Abigail Spanberger, the governor-elect of Virginia, probably put it best when she talked about pragmatism rather than partisanship, and when she talked about competence rather than chaos.
And it's interesting, as you say, about this kind of running a slightly different campaign, and maybe you're arguing, Scott, that sort of division only gets you so far. I mean, it has been very powerful for Donald Trump, but I suppose that the big question for the Democrats is, what are the lessons learned, and what is the path forward? Will, is the path a more centrist path? Is the new path actually maybe some political definition, tacking a bit more to the left? That does seem to be the kind of key existential question. And also, how will senior Democrats handle Zoran Mamdani? I mean, the Democrats were not hugely supportive of him in the run-up. He is going to be an incredibly important figurehead. He in some ways is going to become the figurehead for the Democrats, and Trump, will put a lot of attention on him. How do the Democrats kind of define themselves going forward, Will?
Well, look, we're an ideologically diverse party. I'm not bothered when progressives win in deep blue places. And I hope progressives will be more tolerant of Democrats who run in very competitive terrain, who cannot run in the same way that they do. So we'll continue to have some of the tensions there. But I just want to pick up on points that were just made, by Mark and Scott. First of all, let's not overread this. This is not a midterm election. We won in mostly blue places. Now, we won in Georgia and some other local races, Pennsylvania, that were important. But this was in friendly terrain, and where we have to really be focusing is on competitive terrain. And so we didn't get a lot of clues from this race about that. And unfortunately, most of our gains I don't mean it's unfortunate, but most of our gains came from the voters we already count on. That is, college-educated voters, particularly women. Women were unbelievable. You look at the numbers for both Abby Spanberger in Virginia and Mikey Sherrill. Women were over 65, and it's the only major group won. Didn't win men, and we didn't do all that well with non-college voters. So we made our big gains among those we already get. So that just underscores the challenge that we have to face. But secondly, I want to pick up on Scott's point about the weaknesses of Trump's maximum polarization strategy were really demonstrated now. And he's right. It's one thing when you're running and you're a candidate, but it's another thing when you have to govern. And by giving the Democrats nothing but the back of his hand, he has done two wonderful things. He's given us a turnout magnet. The turnout was great all over the country, and that was, provoked by fury over Trump, the way Trump has treated the opposition party in ways that he shouldn't be doing. And secondly, he's responsible for everything, including the shutdown. Everybody knows he's got all the power. He won't share it. The Democrats have no say right now. And so I think, the way he governs is getting a negative vote. Don't overstate that, but I think that's part of the message from the voters this week.
And Will, can I just come back to you? What about how the Democrats kind of, deal with Zoran Mamdani now?
Well, look, I don't know that Democrats have to deal with Zoran Mamdani. I think Zoran Mamdani has to deal with New York. He's got a really tough. He's got a really tough city to go. Okay? Yes. And and I wish him well. I don't want to, look, he's not my cup of tea, but he won fair and square, ran a good race, ran an impressive race, an exciting race. I think the race showed some weaknesses. He only got half the vote, and Democratic candidates usually get more like 2/3. Kamala Harris, in winning the city, got about 67% of the vote, and she didn't really actually have that strong a performance by historical standards. So he's got a lot of challenges. I want him to succeed. I also want him to step back from some of these out there promises that I don't think he's going to be delivering on.
Yeah, Mark, what do you think about that last bit there about Zoran Mamdani? Is he going to become the kind of leading sort of face of the Democrats?
I actually don't think so. I mean, I don't think Democrats all across the country are paying attention to the mayor of New York City, but I absolutely agree with much of what Will said. As perhaps the progressive on this table, we have a broad tent, and we have to, support progressive candidates where they're progressives. And one of the things that was disappointing to me about New York was the fact that I thought Schumer and Jeffries' reluctance to endorse Mamdani, who had won the Democratic nomination, just outrageous and ridiculous. I mean, the establishment wing of the party always wants liberals to come around after they beat us to bring our enthusiasm and our talents and our part of the party to the table. When we win victories, the establishment center has to come to the table and endorse the candidate. I mean, when you win fair and square, you win fair and square. But I do, again, this gets back to one original point that I made open, which is we don't look at these elections with enough sophistication. I mean, Mamdani did a bunch of great things. He had great media. He is an extraordinary political talent just in his performance skills.
Yeah.
He put an economic agenda on the table that clearly people in New York were seeking. Now, whether it's possible to have free bus service or not, or whether, rent control, you can argue about these policies. But the thing that he did do is he put his finger on and courageously stepped up and said, I'm going to do something about these things. And clearly voters wanted something done about those things. I would also point out another thing about Mamdani that's getting buried, which is he was the beneficiary of $13-14 million in public funding. Progressives always have a hard time winning because we can't raise the same kind of money as our opponents. And in this case, Cuomo and his allies raised and spent $80 million. But Mamdani had enough, and he was able to get through. But I think you got to look at the turnout. I mean, I agree with Will. He got 50%. Cuomo got 40%. But the turnout was extraordinary. I mean, you can't deny that Mamdani energized a base inside the Democratic Party that's critical, especially among young voters. I mean, he won 70% of voters under 30. He beat Cuomo by 20 some points under 45. The Democratic Party's got to get those voters to come back. They weren't with us, they sat it out in 24. So, there's the pluses and the minuses. I would also say, you got to say about Mamdani, he beat two very flawed candidates. I mean, you had one guy who was accused of, an accused sexual predator, and an incumbent mayor that was clearly corrupt. So, you got to look at this stuff.
So you got to look at it in the round. You've got to look into the.
Yeah, you can't just make blanket generalizations about these elections.
Just picking up on what Mark was saying there about this sort of establishment in the Democrats. I mean, Nancy Pelosi has just announced that she's retiring. It was said that Nancy Pelosi and her kind of, I suppose, class of politicians within the Democrats were quite sort of scathing and quite unhelpful towards these kind of younger, more radical Democrats. Do you think that's going to change now in the party?
Well, I mean, let me say, first of all, in terms of a specific, and that is that one reason why you had a little bit of adversity from endorsing Mamdani is, of course, because it was effectively two Democrats running against each other. I mean, Andrew Cuomo is a flawed candidate, but was a Democratic governor of New York. That said, I think one thing we're looking at is there's a changing of the guard in the Democratic Party. We're talking about, we're beyond, I think, the Clintons. We're beyond, obviously, Joe Biden. We are now beyond the so-called Cuomo dynasty in New York. I think, Chuck Schumer is still the Senate Democratic leader, but I think, there will be a changing of the guard there as well. The second thing is, it was inevitable that in the aftermath of 2024, with the disappointment at national level in the races, that there'd be a bit of self-flagellation in the Democratic Party. And I think Mark and Will can probably speak more to that than I can.
No, but we always do that. That's
exactly.
Great.
Exactly. But I'll give you a historical example. That happened after the 1988 election when Michael Dukakis lost to the elder George Bush. And of course, who won the election in 1992. I think the thing here is there's 2 points, I think, which is that American media has been too quick to play up divisions on the Democratic side and not look at the absolute fragmentation of the Republican Party. And I think why they focused at the Democratic divisions is they've been looking at national level. They've been looking at a Trumpist narrative versus the Democrats at national level who've been scrapping with each other. If you go to state and local level, where the lifeblood of the Democratic Party is, there's a lot of talent there. And it's a talent that defies center versus progressive. I could talk to you about a state I know quite well, Kentucky, with Governor Andy Beshear. I could talk to you about Governor Moore in Maryland coming forward. We could talk about Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. We could talk about Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. We could talk about Pete Buttigieg in terms of his experience in cabinet. I could tick all of these off. And what I would say to you here is that while progressives and centrists, if you have to play that game, may differ on some of the approaches and means to issues, they're going to be united on key issues that have to be dealt with: cost of living, transport, energy, education, healthcare. And one thing Zoran Mamdani did, because I agree with Mark and Will, he is a generational politician in terms of the way he approaches this, is he's put a word that is already now on the political map, and Donald Trump's already tried to steal it this week, which is affordability. And I think affordability is something that you don't have to be a centrist or a progressive to debate this. You can unite on the idea of that you want to talk about how you can make this happen. And that politics of competence, I think, will trump the idea of politics of division.
Now, Will, you're obviously, you're very steeped in the Democratic Party. You and I have met in real life. You know that I'm associated with the Labour Party, and we're kind of sister parties. And when you said there about, the Democrats are really good at beating themselves up, the Labour Party, hold my beer kind of thing. Like, we love that. We're very good at fighting. We're very good at kind of introspection. But, even though I agree with a lot of what Scott said there, and I think, we in the Labour Party have very similar discussions. We have different factions within the Labour Party. We have different sort of wings and different kind of, strands of political thinking. You can coalesce around big ticket ideas like cost of living, health, all of that kind of thing. But within that, there are difficult policy choices. I mean, we are having a budget. You will know we're running up to a budget here. There's really big division within the Labour Party about which direction of travel. And this is a Labour Party that has managed to win power, struggling at the moment. There's no denying that. But these big kind of questions about policy and ideology are often not just about factions fighting each other. It is because there is a fundamental difference in terms of how different wings of parties, different generations within parties think are the right answers. And that's where it's going to be tricky for the Democrats.
Yes, well, it's always tricky for the Democrats, but and for Labor too, apparently. But look, I want to agree with Scott. All candidates, center, left, whoever they ran on affordability. And with all due respect to Zoran, he didn't invent this issue. They all, Ali Spanberger put it front and center, so did Mikey Sherrill. Every Democrat is talking about it. And the interesting irony here is that Donald Trump is in danger of becoming the next Joe Biden. That is the president who ignored the clear, unambiguous message from the voters about what he should be focusing on. He's sending troops into American cities. He's doing this idiot tariff war globally. And the voters are saying, you know what? That's not what we expected of you. So we could all, but you're right. That covers up a multitude of fissures in the Democratic Party, and I don't want to run from the question. We have differences. Good. You know, I would never have endorsed Mamdani because I'm not a democratic socialist, and I think the Democratic Party can't afford to be democratic socialist. It can afford to have a wing of very left people who want to have these ideas and run in places where they can win with these ideas. But what I look at is the national picture. We're still a majority party. We're out of all power everywhere right now, except for the states, some of the states that are national power. And, we have to build a bigger coalition. And we have to start in the midterms next year and then in the presidential after that with the generational shift. And so these ideological questions will become very important as we get to that and as we choose our candidates who are going to define the party's philosophy to the voters broadly.
Okay, Mark, you get the final word on this discussion. Go on.
Well, I will say that you guys at the opening played part of Mamdani's speech. You didn't play what I thought was the best line, where he quoted Eugene V. Debs. I can see a dawn of a better day for humanity.
You're here.
Now, Will may not like the Debs allusion, but I do think Democrats, if we could get our act together, there could be a new day and a dawn for humanity. There's a lot more we could talk here about in terms of our need to rebuild the brand of the party, reconnect with working class voters, which I think is our central challenge in 2006 and certainly in 2008. We will not win places like Wisconsin, Ohio, and Pennsylvania unless we rebuild a bond with working class voters. The numbers aren't there, and I don't see our agenda to do that. I will say I will blow a little bit of smoke at Will. I still have my Mandate for Change book on my bookshelf, Will, and
do you really?
Scott,
you haven't burned it?
Scott mentioned the aftermath of 2008. Your listeners should know that Will was a key architect of bringing us back in 1992. And
thank you.
Even though we don't agree all the time, we have been here before, and I think we'll find that better day soon.
Good. We like to end on a harmonious note. We like to bring people together here on the show. What a fascinating discussion, gentlemen. Really, really interesting and good to have that kind of honest and quite nuanced, thoughtful, more sophisticated conversation about, it's too easy just to look at these and go, yay, everything's fixed for the Democrats. You're all absolutely right. There's a long way to go, but there is some hope in there as well. A great conversation. My huge thanks to Will, Mark and Scott.